Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Kim Curtis, and welcome back to Savvy Broadcasting, Life Unscripted. I'm so grateful to have you back here today. We're going to talk about a different topic today. We're going to go deeper into retirement secrets. That is the book you wrote, but we're going to talk about some of the key things people can do regardless of your age. As I mentioned just before the interview, most of the age group of our audience happens to be in their 40s to 50s. But hey, this can benefit anyone. The earlier you get started, the better. But why did you write this book in particular about retirement secrets? What was your impetus for that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. The first book I wrote was Money Secrets, Keys to Smart Investing. And that pulled back the curtain on the financial services industry to reveal why smart people make bad investment mistakes. And shortly after that book, probably within a matter of a 2-month time period, I had 3 different clients ask me if there was a book for them to read that had to do more with like lifestyle, not money, but when they step off, what are the activities? How do you transition into what's next for you? And so, being a data researcher girl, I decided to read a lot of retirement books, and there were very little, but there was one that I kind of liked, but it was written terribly. And so I decided to write that book, and that's Retirement Secrets, Keys to Retiring Happy, Healthy, and Free. It has a lot of client stories in it, a lot of missteps from people as they enter into retirement, and then how to navigate in it in a really compelling, thriving, vibrant way. And it's a fun book to read.
Oh, I love this because I recall as a child, my grandma was at retirement age by the time we came to live with her. We came to live with my grandma once my parents divorced in New York City. And she was like, don't get old, it sucks. And she was living off a very small, and for many reasons, but one of them being the fact that finances were really tough. She lived off of Social Security. She worked her entire life, very, very young, and retired probably 65 years old, and it was a very fixed income, and it was tough for her. She never really got to have much fun with friends or whatever because it was that really tight budget of living on the Social Security. And I was like, and my mom would say, well, one day when you retire, I'm like, what? I can be like grandma and have nothing to have fun with. So I love that you're talking about that there to set up and kind of get ready for that stage of your life so you don't have to be struggling or feeling like I don't get to really enjoy and live life to the fullest.
Yeah. And regardless of your age, I mean, we're seeing a lot of young people who looked at their parents and said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to live that way. And so they're actually saving really early on in their 20s and into their 30s so that they have options later as it relates to whether they choose to work or not work or do something that they love and get paid for it. Unlike the baby boom generation was the first experiment of not necessarily having pensions, where our parents may have had pensions. And so in the late 70s, early 80s is when a lot of companies gave up their pensions, and the baby boomers were the first to be responsible for saving for their own retirement outside of Social Security. So we all know how that ended up.
Yeah. Not fun for a lot of people.
Yeah, not as good as they would have expected. Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah. And we don't know how it's going to turn out later on. You don't want to really just depend on that Social Security or pension. You might, or most people don't have the pension, but just the Social Security without that backup. And, tell me, because I've heard from a financial advisor many years ago who came on and said, basically, I think everyone should have a side hustle doing something they love, even if they get paid little. That way they just kind of build that little basket up. And then maybe later on, that's something they can rely on when they go into the golden age. And so they are doing that fun thing, but making money out of it at the same time.
Well, there's a lot that we can learn from the 20-something, 30-somethings, but the idea of having a second job or a side hustle or something that provides passion is absolutely important for engagement. In the research, when I was writing the book, that there was the number one thing to allow for a vibrant retirement. There's several secrets to a successful retirement, but one is community and social engagement, and we call it social wealth. And your ability to be engaged in either your brain for what you do or consult or volunteer somewhere that allows you to do something, even maybe not getting paid. But there's lots of different things that you could do to keep your brain active and social.
Ooh. You mentioned that is a really, really good point. I recall hearing one statistic many years ago from, she was a pilot on my show, and she said often many people with vocations where this was my thing and I loved it, not everyone loves their work, but people who do, and they had this vocation, once they stopped being a lawyer, doctor, pilot, whatever, their identity was gone and their community was gone. And shortly thereafter, they would get very sick and die not too long after they ended up retiring. Not at all what we expect when we're going to retire. And so I like that you mentioned how important it is to have that social credit, that social wealth, because the community is what it's all about. If you're just sitting at home, oh, great, I don't get to go to work, but now I have no friends anymore.
That's really true. And there's a couple things. We call it in the book, I describe relationship circles. And there's an exercise that there are 4 types of relationships. One is the inner circle, you are in the center. And then that next circle is your intimacy, your friends that have intimacy that you would share your deepest secrets with. It could be some family members, it could be girlfriends, it could be others. The next is friendships. So that you do activities together. You may play tennis together. You may pickleball. And then after that is participation, the circle of participation. And that is people that you hire to do stuff for you, whether it's a person that does your nails or your financial advisor or your accountant. The circle of participation is outer. And then the biggest, the furthest one out, I'm trying to think of what that was. Exchange, excuse me. Circle of participation, circle of exchange. Exchange is the one that you hire for. So what you do is you look at participation, can be church and various other things that you participate in. Where are your people? And if you don't have people in the intimacy or the friendship, and they're mostly in participation and exchange, you got to move them to the center. And that's a way to identify where you stand. And the older we get, sometimes it's harder. And also, if you relocate, what does that look like in terms of social engagement?
Yeah. And here's the thing people often don't think about. Like when we had people come on and talk about sales, often people think sales is just pushing my goods or services. It's really starting at the point of building relationships. And then, people desire, need, and want what you have to offer to the marketplace. And then, it's a natural fit. It's not about forcing people, but the same goes with this, is that the first tenement is building relationships. And I think if you're relocating or now leaving the job force, I might have to build relationships in a whole new way. I heard from one woman who recently retired, all my old friends I worked with are busy at a thing called a job. And I'm here at home going, I'm bored. And so now she has to build that new circle of friends and engagement so that she can find new ways and purpose.
Yes. So that's relationship circles, and to identify where those circles are and work to build it so that people get closer into the intimacy and friendship circle versus participation and exchange.
Yeah. And also just to mention, it takes time to build those relationships. So don't get, I think myself too, when you go somewhere new, you're like, darn, I have no friends yet. And it's, sometimes it could take years to build those real, deep, intimate relationships. It's not a one-step process. And investment of the relationship. Yeah.
And when you think about it, retirement is so much more than money. I mean, money, sure, you want to make sure that you have enough so that you don't have scarcity or you run out. But it's really about vitality and engagement. And so the book, and why it was so interesting to write, is one of the things, obviously, is that you can have all the money in the world and have a failed retirement. Health is so important. And what came up over and over again is your new job is fitness. And you need to do that 6 times a day. So your new job, at least an hour, is fitness, and you do cardio, you do strength training, and you intermittently, but that is at least 6 days a week to keep your body strong and your mind sharp.
Yeah. And I'd say let's get started on that as early as possible before you even leave the workforce.
That's exactly right.
I heard a very interesting, fun story on YouTube. It was a woman who had started in her 70s. She got to the point where she couldn't even put on her clothes without sitting in a chair and putting her pants on. She had to hold on to things when she was going up the stairs, trying to sit down on the toilet. And she said, life had just gotten really, really tough. And she said, I want to be here a bit longer and enjoy my life, but I'm finding that doing things is so hard. So what she did, she started doing yoga in her bed, just little moves bit by bit. Within the year, she'd gotten to herself to a point where she could lift her leg up like this. And she inspired me because I can't do that right now.
Movement is life. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned the importance of health, relationships, and friends. What do you find was some of the misunderstanding that people had regarding retirement when you wrote the book?
Thinking that it's like a chance to just step off and relax. I mean, that's maybe good for a month or two, maybe 3. But what happens in the research and the interviews that I've had is they call it the 5 Ds and the 1 B. And the 5 Ds are depression, dependence, meaning you're relying on your spouse to keep engaged or for activities, disability, lack of movement. So they get unable to participate based on disability. Divorce, the graying divorce. All of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I have to spend the next 20, 30 years with this person. Oh, yeah. I don't know if I want to. And there's a high statistic that the graying divorce is bigger. And then the last D is drunkenness. Happy hour comes a little earlier and earlier when the big B is boredom.
So interesting. So basically what ends up happening, if you don't find a new way to have purpose, to build those relationships, those outer circles, you end up getting bored pretty quickly. And I could totally imagine that. I remember even as a kid, we'd have the 2 months off for summer. We're like, yay, summer vacation. I was bored pretty quickly watching TV around the clock. And, I didn't want to go back to school, but I was bored. And so this idea that I get to do whatever I want. Now, even if you had all the money in the world, let's say, and you had billions of dollars in the bank and I could travel all over the world. All right. Yeah. You travel the world. Now what?
Right. In Retirement Secrets, there's over 500 different types of things that you can do. That's called retirement mapping. And you could cross off, or, oh gosh, I used to do that as a hobby as a kid. I wonder if I would still like to do that. And so you identify that 1 to 4. Yeah. And then you bring all those in, and then you start to compare that with your spouse, because you often have very different activities, and you decide and you negotiate how much you do together and how much you do separate. And that's a whole different thing. In renegotiating your relationship with your mate, it's a different place, and chores and everything else needs to be reevaluated, because otherwise that will get very old very fast if the roles stay the same.
I totally get you there. Now, tell me about the divorce rate. Is it because people have now slowed down enough and they're retired that they can look at their mate and go like, oh my gosh, who are you? I was so busy before, I didn't get a chance to know who you really were. Is that why the divorce goes up so much during that time?
That absolutely is one of the reasons, is that they don't know each other anymore. They've raised their kids, they've done their stuff, and their next is not on the same page. We have a couple where he wanted to retire and leave the area. He wanted to get out of New York State and move south. And all of her friends were there. Her family was there. Her girlfriends were there. Her mother was there. And he had no family in that area. And then he wanted to buy an RV and travel the world for 2 years to figure out where they would relocate.
Yeah.
And all she wanted to do was stay where she lived, or, well, she certainly didn't want to be in an RV for 2 years and make lunches and dinners and be stuck with her spouse for 2 years. She needed to be grounded. And so we had to actually navigate for them in terms of a relocation checklist and actually walk them through what was important to each one of them so that they can negotiate and navigate that differing retirement objectives right out of the gate. And what happened is they ended up buying a place in Tennessee on a lake. So her mom can come visit her. And then they did that for 2 years. So they had their place. She got it, she kind of nested. And then he was able to buy the RV, and she agreed that she would go around occasionally with him on it versus 2 years looking for a place. So it was easier for her to say yes to after she had her retirement home.
It's phenomenal, because I think people think it's an all or nothing. Oh, but it's my dream. And I've heard people who, I know a couple that were friends for years, and one had totally different ideas of where they wanted to be. One wanted to be in the Southwest, and one wanted to be in New York City. And two totally different cultures, and they both kept up. Well, they ended up doing 6 months there and 6 months there, but both were unhappy for 6 months.
Yeah, that's really true.
And so it's like, finding what I love about your story is they found a way that we could compromise, but be happy about it, because we know that we're going to get to actually, like, it was a forever home or a nesting home for her. So she got something at the moment that worked for her, where he got something as well at the moment. And so making it work for both people all the time. It's just, there is a solution. You just sometimes have to look a little deeper, and it could be even better than what you initially had envisioned in your head.
That's right. Which gets back to the graying, the divorce for that age group. I have a couple of questions that are in the back of the book, and I just opened it up because you have to say, who am I and who are you, your spouse, and who are we together as we go into retirement? Those are really questions that are important. And then what are the changing roles and identities, which we already talked about. And then we already talked about this, expectations of time together and apart. And then the obligations that you have with children and grandchildren and others. That could be a big obligation that one spouse may not think of it as important. That's very important to the other. And then, of course, where do you want to live? And what's that intimacy conversation in terms of emotionally and physically? You got to have those difficult conversations, and it helps oftentimes. In terms of the nature of our work, is I have a legal background in negotiation and mediation, so I could hold the room, so to speak, a safe place in the container to allow for those conversations to occur without someone feeling beaten up or don't have a voice or not being heard.
And this is so important. We had many years ago a woman called a mediator. That was her job. And I was like, I didn't even know those existed. But it's such a great thing to have that third party, because as I said prior, I think a lot of times in the hectic lifestyles, kids, whatever job, that often we forget ourselves. We don't remember who we are, let alone who our kids and husband are or wife. And it's getting in touch with yourself, your husband, and then where are we together and the whole picture, or rebuilding that vision, because the vision will now change.
Christina, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, ultimately, for many people, they were on a hamster wheel and didn't do what they loved. They just made money. And so to finally step off and have the opportunity to have impact and purpose and legacy. So if you could find out who you are, if you haven't taken time up until you step off, that's the perfect place. And we talk about that in the book. One of the first few chapters is, who are you? Why are you here? What are your unique gifts and superpowers? And what are you going to do to make a difference in the world if that's important to you? And that's really, for young people that are listening to this, that's actually the key to the gate of long-term success, is finding your purpose and passion and creating an opportunity out of that. Because when you're doing what you love, money follows you. You're receptive to money. Because remember, money's looking for you, not the other way around.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, we could go on for many more hours, I'm sure, but I don't want us to leave without everyone finding out how they can get their very own copy of Retirement Secrets: Keys to Retiring Happy, Healthy, and Free. How can they do that?
On Amazon, Amazon.com, and you can get a copy there. Thank you.
Awesome. Then everyone go to wealthlegacyinstitute.com to find out more about Kim. And if you need her mediating skills or or financial skills, just give her a holler. And Kim, I just have to thank you for coming back to Savvy. It was great to have you back here in the beginning of 2023, when people are beginning to make those resolutions. Here's something they could do to broaden their life. They don't have to wait till they retire. They can do it today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Christina.
You betcha. Take care.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more Savvy episodes and Savvy Biz Tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.